Hello and welcome to the turbulent world with me, James M. Dorsey, as your host. Divide and conquer has become Israel's main operating principle in a world in which it stands condemned for its war conduct, impunity, and intransigence, and is increasingly isolated. Israel applies the principle, whether it is in Gaza, Syria, its uphill battle to gain the high ground in its information wars, or its efforts to encourage Jewish immigration. In Israel's latest application of the principle, it sees an opportunity to capitalize on Christian assertions that their African brethren are the primary victims of Muslim aggression in what amounts to a religion driven conflict. A recent spate of kidnappings for ransom by criminal gangs and jihadists in Nigeria, a country with swaths of ungoverned land, and long-standing violence driven as much by religion and ethnicity as by access to land and water and crime, has fueled the assertions. So has US President Donald Trump's questionable claim that South Africa is committing genocide against whites. It creates openings for Israel in its information wars. South Africa is the main plaintiff in proceedings in the International Court of Justice, or ICJ, that charge Israel with genocide in Gaza. Last week, Mr. Trump lashed out at Nigeria for doing nothing to stop what U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Mike Waltz called genocide wearing the mask of chaos. Mr. Trump has threatened to cut all aid to Nigeria if the country fails to stop the killing of Christians by Muslim militants. Pro-Israeli groups have gone full court on Africa to promote Islamophobia and secure their ties to Christians, said a well-connected conservative activist, noting that religion was only one of several drivers of the intercommunal violence in Africa. Encouraged by supporters of Israel, some Trump administration officials pushed for the president to raise with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during his visit to Washington earlier this month the illicit flow of arms, allegedly including from Saudi Arabia, to Islamist and tribal Muslim militants in Nigeria. The flow of illicit weapons complicates the problem. We flagged this in advance of the Crown Prince's visit, a U.S. official said. It's not clear whether Mr. Trump raised the issue with Mr. bin Salman, nor is there evidence that Saudi arms have reached militants, whose primary sources of weaponry are looted Libyan and Nigerian military depots. The Middle East Media Research Institute, or MEMRI, founded by Yigal Karmon, a former advisor to Israel's West Bank and Gaza Occupation Authority, and Prime Ministers Yitzhak Shamir and Yitzhak Rabin, last week prided itself on highlighting the threats that African Christians face, primarily from jihadists, according to the Institute. In doing so, MEMRI has for several years pushed a narrative that reduces the plight of African Christians to an exclusively religious conflict instigated by Islamists. Not a day goes by without the MEMRI team documenting jihadi reports of attacks on African Christians, said MEMRI's executive director, Stephen Stalinsky. Analyst and former British Army Major Andrew Fox acknowledged that a purely religious framing can indeed further inflame tensions, but cautioned that for those living through the horrors, such academic balancing offers little solace. Ironically, many African Christians have a greater affinity with the conservative social mores of their Muslim brethren than with the social liberalism in the West, where many have endorsed sexual diversity, including homosexuality. The schism has driven a wedge that threatens to tear the Anglican Church apart over LGBTQ and women's rights, and the Church of England's failure to support embattled African communities assertively. In the latest fracture, the Global Anglican Future Conference, or GAFCON, a gathering of conservative churches, including the largest and fastest growing congregations in Africa, took issue with last month's appointment of Bishop Sarah Mullally as the first woman to be Archbishop of Canterbury, the Anglican Communion's symbolic spiritual leader. The future has arrived, said GAFCON's chairman, Archbishop Laurent Mbanda of Rwanda. Encouraging anti-Muslim narratives to bolster the Christian assertions serves multiple Israeli purposes. It allows Israel to garner favor with evangelicals in Africa as well as the United States, where once fervent supporters of Israel have become increasingly critical of the Jewish majority state and more empathetic towards the plight of the Palestinians. Writer and researcher Suraya Dadu noted that as the epicenter of Christianity shifts rapidly towards Africa and Pentecostalism, in particular, emerges as a particularly potent presence on the continent, Christian Zionism will increasingly shape Israel's public diplomacy in Africa. Israel's focus on Africa paid off when last year International Court of Justice Vice President Julia Sebutinde was the only member of the world's highest judicial body to oppose all provisional measures it advocated in South Africa's case against Israel. The Lord is counting on me to stand on the side of Israel, Mrs. Sebutinde said in August at the launch of a new Watoto Church evangelical ministry in the Ugandan capital of Kampala. Projecting African Christians as exclusively under attack by Muslims also expands the geography of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's assertion that Muslim migration to Europe is the driver of public opinion on the continent, turning against Israel. It bolsters Mr. Netanyahu's positioning of Israel as the bulwark against Muslim barbarism that he hopes will resonate with the far right in the United States and elsewhere. In doing so, Mr. Netanyahu, coupled with his alignment with the far right globally, despite its past and present associations with anti Semitism, is playing a dangerous game that puts Jewish communities at risk. By legitimizing Islamophobia, Mr. Netanyahu opens the door to the legitimization of religious, ethnic, and racial prejudice and bigotry across the board, including anti Semitism. Even so, Mr. Netanyahu and his Aliyah, or Jewish immigration minister, Ofer Sofer, a member of ultra-nationalist finance ministers Bezalel Smotrich's religious Zionist party, have no qualms about prioritizing immigration of Jewish communities that may broaden their electoral base, rather than adhering to Israel's founding assertion that it is a haven for Jews, irrespective of their religious or political inclinations. Not to mention the juxtaposition of Jewish immigration with Israeli efforts to depopulate Gaza and eventually the occupied West Bank. In its latest move, the government this week approved the migration of 5,800 members of India's B'nai Menashe community, who claim to be descendants of one of the lost Israelite tribes. The catch is that Israel's Orthodox rabbinate doesn't recognize the B'nai Menashe as Jews. Like other communities, including Falashas from Ethiopia, who were flown to Israel in several waves in the last 45 years, the Indian community will be forced on arrival to convert to Judaism, in accordance with Orthodox religious practice. Orthodox rabbis will likely encourage them to send their children to Orthodox schools and live in Orthodox communities in the hope that they will vote for religious Zionism in elections expected in the coming year. According to most polls, were elections to be held today, religious Zionism might not even cross the electoral threshold. A few thousand or even hundreds of votes could determine whether or not this party makes it into the Knesset when elections are held, said Haaretz reporter Judy Maltz. Thank you for joining me today. Thousands worldwide are avid readers and listeners of the turbulent world. They make this column and podcast possible. Join them in helping to maintain and expand the column and podcast by becoming a paid subscriber. You can choose one of the subscription options at jamesmdorsey.substack.com. Best wishes, and see you soon.